No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to talk about an article that I came across on LinkedIn that's a couple years old, but it bears repeating and going over because I think these are things that they really stand the test of time and they're important regardless of when an article is written. The article is written by Ron Carucci, who is a friend of the show. He wrote one of the best leadership books I've ever read called To Be Honest a few years ago. And so when I see an article by him, I tend to give it a look just to see what the content is. The title of this article is How to Make Your Leadership Team Absolutely Exceptional. And, I like that. We talk about high performance teams all the time. There are definitely leadership teams out there who are exceptional. But in a lot of organizations and in a lot of teams, there are individual leaders who I think are absolutely exceptional. And then there are individual leaders on those leadership teams who are not exceptional, who are mediocre or who need a lot of work. And there are probably some people who just need to go away altogether. But to have a team become absolutely exceptional, to me, what that says is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So, you get the 1 + 1 + 1 = 9 in terms of their impact if you have a truly exceptional leadership team. There's a lot in this article, but there are 3 different concepts in here that I want to go over because I think they're the ones that our listeners will get the most amount of, a benefit from. But it is definitely worth reading the entire article. So we'll link to it in the podcast description and we'll go over it. So what were your thoughts about the article in general?
Yeah, I agree. We're a huge Ron fan here on the show. And he's yet to miss for me.
Right.
Everything he writes, I'm like, there's something in there that really is phenomenal. And this is the big question that a lot of leaders always have. It's like, how do you lead a team and make them exceptional? And how do you, build high performing teams? And what are the things that you can do to, number one, kind of check yourself as a leader and making sure that you're showing up in a space that's creating the opportunity for your team to be exceptional. But then also, what I like about the article is he addresses some of the things like, what do you do in these spaces when you might see some behaviors or some things happening that on the surface might not seem like a big deal, but can really chip away at the ability for you to have a highly exceptional team.
I couldn't have said it better. That's what it is. The difference between a truly exceptional leadership team and one that isn't is in these little details. They're the little interactions that happen that you might think don't mean much, and they probably don't individually, but they absolutely add up. And they can add up and send your leadership team in the right direction or send it in the wrong direction. The first one I want to talk about here, I think is I overlooked it at first because I thought, okay, there's some more meat here later on. But one of the first things he talks about is this idea of embodying a charter, and those are his words. But what it really means is, what are the rules of the team? What do you sit down with and decide are the rules for how things are done within this leadership team? So if it's a leadership team, you're assuming that these are people who are peers to each other, and the rules kind of say what are kind of the guiding principles of how we interact with each other. What are the guiding principles of what we take on as a team in terms of what is our job to accomplish versus what is not our job to accomplish. And it's really important to be clear about these things because you need to be able to figure these out when there isn't the kind of the emotion and the personal buy-in that exists when you can apply it to an individual point in time or decision that has to be made. You figure these out in advance when no one has any kind of personal stake in any one item. And then that allows you to just look back at what you all agreed on together to apply it to whatever that moment is. Much easier to do it that way than to try to convince people, I think, that they're doing something they shouldn't be doing in the moment when they're already bought in.
Yeah, I love what he says. He says, this is a compass and your report card. And I think it's so critical when you are looking to have exceptional teams is that you've got to have some type of a way of kind of defining the team, of some way of laying out who we are and what we do and how we approach things, some kind of mantra, some type of manifesto, whatever you want to call it. But there's got to be something there that can be looked at from a team and say that's who we are. And there are a lot of tools. There's a lot of ways to do that. Everything from like assessments that you can do with a team to aligning on certain, whether it's quotes or developmental, themes or words or whatever that might be. But I think it's so important for a team to have a sense of identity as to here's who we are, here's how we do our work, and here's how we measure it. And we do that with intention. There's something that a leader of mine said a long time ago that's always stuck with me, which is like, we don't let things fall off the plate, we push them off.
Yes.
We do everything with intention, and if we're not good at something, we know that we're not good at it, and we know why we're not good at it, and we know why we're not focusing on it. And it's not that we can't get better at it, but you have to make decisions as a team to say, these are the things that we are going to really define us and our success, and then these other things are things that we need to make sure that we're good at, but we don't have to be great at. They don't have to take a lot of our time and effort because we have clearly defined what the things are that we're doing, and we are really aligned on how we do this work and the lenses that we all use collectively and shared. So I'm a huge fan of this, and that charter might look different for everyone, but there has to be something there if you're truly talking about exceptional teams.
Yeah, I agree with that. The one thing that I'll say about this that is something to keep in mind is that nothing in this charter can go against or be at odds with the overall values and principles of the organization. Meaning you can't use this to set your team apart from a standpoint of, oh, well, these things that the company put forth, they don't apply to us. We're the exception. Exceptional does not mean exception, right? It still has to be in line with the company as a whole. But it's something that you kind of, there's self-imposed rules on how you'll work with each other within a team and what you decide to do as a team, but it can't give the impression to other teams that you somehow believe that your team is either, the rules don't apply to you, or that you are above them, or that you are, kind of, exceptional from a standpoint of, anointed, or that you get to do things differently than they do because of the accomplishments. There has to be some humility in this, and really it has to be almost innocuous from an outside perspective. A person looking at it would think, oh, okay, that's how they run their team. Great, but from the inside, it needs to be something that speaks to you and every individual on the team deeply, and something that you adhere to, and something that you honor in your actions to each other. The next thing that he discusses that I want to go over is this idea of creating belonging in every direction, is what he says. Now, belonging is something that has popped up in a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations recently, and it's great. Like the idea of belonging kind of takes that to the next level in terms of this is reported by the employees, not necessarily by the company. A company can tell you what their diversity numbers are. A company can tell you what the demographics are at every level of the organization, and if people are getting promoted, and if people are all these things you can measure. Belonging, I think, is very self-reported from the individual standpoint. A company can't say our employees feel like they belong. The employees have to say they feel like they belong. And so on an exceptional team, employees have to believe that they belong, not just to the leader, but to each other.
Yeah, I think this is the ultimate element of like true teamwork, is that idea and feeling that they work together, that they have each other's backs, that they know they can use each other as resources. There's kind of this idea of like, we can solve it together, and as a leader, that's a space where I think that sometimes I see a lot of leaders that have to be the resource for everything. They have to be the decision maker and everything. They're kind of like, you all go out and do this work and then come back to me, and then I'll make a decision on what we should do next or what the thing is, versus saying, hey, here's the expectation. Here's what we're being asked to deliver. Here's the thing that we need to work on. Let me give you a little bit of my framework on how I'm looking at it and how I think that we should be considering this work, and then assign and allow the team or a collection of the team or a pair from the team to go do that work and build that on, and then really provide them with the recognition that you not only see maybe in the outcome of the strategy, but how they got it done, how they work together, kind of building that idea that it's not about an individual. And when you sense and hear those things, that you kind of have to step in and redirect or make sure that everyone who's involved is getting the credit they deserve. That is where I think when you're creating belonging, again, it's building the connections amongst the team. and allowing them to function collectively. But then being conscious, like you got to be also really, really careful that it doesn't become so tight that it won't welcome others in or not allow for other perspectives or that type of thing as well. So it's a balance that you really truly have to have there. But I think that, I'd rather deal with working through some of the elements of like, making sure that it's not getting too cliquey. But having them function in such a way that they work really, really well together is critical.
The last one I want to discuss in this article, he says, amputate collusion immediately. We think about this from a standpoint of, the meeting after the meeting, like the meeting ends and everybody gets up and leaves, and then you stick around to say something to your boss that you wouldn't necessarily say in front of the group. That's where this can come up. Or, as Ron puts it, clickiness. Gossip and, kind of like undermining. Sometimes that can be, it can be rooted not in malice, meaning it could just be that someone doesn't feel comfortable speaking up amongst an entire group and they want to say it to an individual person. And that implies a lack of psychological safety, but it isn't necessarily a huge issue. The issue comes is when people are using it to undermine people. When they're trying to kind of like get in and form like these little alliances that can somehow be used to undermine somebody who they don't like, and that's where it's the leader's responsibility to get rid of it right away.
Yeah, and like, look, the reality is that this is going to happen regardless on most teams, because there are going to be relationships where people have more in common with each other. And whether it's like the amount of time they've worked together, the teams that they've worked on, the previous work that they've done, like humans are going to act like humans from time to time. The important part of this, though, is as a leader, is that when you sense it or when it's brought to you, that's really where you kind of have to force the hand of breaking this up and stopping it right away. He uses a great example in here, and I love this around like, somebody's like, hey, have you had a chance to connect with so-and-so because, I'm not, they've kind of like been, not doing great work or, like I'm trying to work around them. Do you have any advice on that? And instead of being the one who says like, well, I want to give you the advice, you say, well, what have they said? What was their response to the feedback you gave them? Mm-hmm. And like, well, I was going to you first. Like, well, how about you go to them? Like, how would you feel if one of your peers came to your boss and was saying some things about you and had not given you the chance yet to even hear it or understand it or address it? So like, we work collectively together. You need to go have that conversation. If you'd like for me to do that, like I'd be more than happy to pull them in right now and the three of us can sit down if you want to share what your concerns are with them. But like, that's how things have to work. You have to work it out amongst each other. And you start to kind of snip that away very, very quickly. That forces the hand of the team to realize like, okay, like that's not going to work. We're gonna have to work together. We're gonna have to not boil up some of these things and kind of get like the leader in charge to have favorites or that type of deal. You really have to work hard on that.
Right. If you have a lot of individual contributors reporting to you, right, you're not leading a team of leaders, or you're not talking about a team of leaders, but rather people who don't have people reporting up to them. How you as a leader deal with this individually can vary from one organization to another, from one team to another. Meaning, if someone comes to you and says something about one of their coworkers, whether or not you say to them, no, I'm not going to deal with this. You need to deal with this. You need to give them the feedback. In some situations, I think that is appropriate, meaning in some situations, we don't hold employees to a high enough standard. We don't give them the opportunity to do the tough work of giving feedback that needs to be given. We take it off their plate as somehow it's our responsibility as the leader. And in some situations, it is appropriate to take it off their plate, and you as the leader have to have those conversations. If you're dealing with a team of people who have said, I want to lead people, and they are in that role, it's their responsibility to lead people, this needs to be the default. There can never be a time when on the very first time feedback is mentioned, the leader takes it off the plate of someone reporting to them if that person is a leader of people. A person who's a leader of people needs to be able to give feedback to a peer and to other people. And if they are unable to do that, they probably are the wrong person for the job. They're probably in the wrong role. And so it really needs to be the default to say to people who are coming to you, kind of circumventing the feedback process if they're leaders, that no, you're not going to take this off their plate, that they need to be able to go in and have these conversations with their people. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, for this episode's 1-minute hack, here's what I want you to do. Click on the article link in the podcast description and read through the entire thing through the lens of your own leadership team, the team that you are on, and look at the items as you read through it that make you uncomfortable. The ones that you read and go, oh, that's great. Yeah, I like that. Typically, that means that you're probably already doing that. It's the parts you want to focus on are the ones where you read and you think, ooh, that's more of a difficult one. That probably means that your leadership team isn't necessarily great at that. Focus on those, and that's where you're going to have kind of the low-hanging fruit of becoming a more exceptional leadership team. If you are a leader of a team of leaders, then you need to go through all of this. Maybe even with your people, the people who report to you, go through all of this and almost have like a self inventory of where you and the team are doing well and where you're not doing well, and then put it on as the responsibility of the people who report to you to figure out what they can do to get better at this. If you approach it from a standpoint of not an individual problem that has to be solved or an individual person that has to be solved, but rather the shortcomings of how the team works together as a whole, you will probably have less kind of pushback from a standpoint of individual anxiety around people feeling like they're being coached up, as opposed to the team looking at what they can do better. Because really, for a team to be exceptional, it doesn't matter how exceptional the individual leaders are. Being able to work together as an exceptional team is a different skill set. And these are some of the skills that you can use to really get to that next level.
Yeah, I like that 1-minute hack. And one of the things that Ron says in the article is like the leadership choices that can make or break the cohesion and energizing dynamic of a team. This is the kind of what his version is of these things in this article, and it's so spot on. Like there are times when you're gonna make the day-to-day decisions on projects, on strategies, on things that have to happen in day-to-day. But then there are definitely times when you have to pull your head up and really think about who are we and how do we. What is our charter? How do we function as a team? What is the kind of the sandbox, the framework that you've built as a leader that allows your team to be successful, to work together, to push the boundaries, to challenge one another in a healthy way, to debate? That's really what this is talking about. And if you have yet to define those things, or if you assume that people know what they are, that's what reflecting on this article should really be helpful with, is going through it. Like, what does that mean? And if I was to ask my team these questions, like what is our charter? What do we stand for as a team? If they can't answer the question, then there's obviously work to do. So like that's kind of what I would suggest is like, ask, kind of taking these different elements and asking these questions of those that are on your team that you trust, and that to be honest and to be very transparent with what they believe, and see if it's as clear as you believe it is. And I think that will be the first step in understanding like where the work is that you need to go do.
Yeah, that's so true. I think this work is incredibly important because there are people who individually are exceptional leaders and they do great work, and then they still leave organizations. And when that happens, oftentimes it can be attributed to not feeling like they are working alongside people who are just as committed as they are, or who follow the rules that they follow, or who are committed to doing the best work that these people are committed to doing. Typically we look at the people who have dropped off the radar from a performance standpoint, and we put all our focus on them because we don't want them to lead, we want them to step up to what they were before. But oftentimes it's the highest performers that will surprise you when they leave your organization, and you feel blindsided by it. But it means that there was an issue oftentimes with the team cohesion and how they felt like they worked amongst the broader team. If they're not feeling like they're getting great work done as a team and they're just getting individual work done, that's a recipe for them, being more likely to leave and to, seek out greener pastures where other people might be as committed to the work that they are. So this is very important work to do. And if you have a lot of high-performing individuals, you're definitely on the right path already. Get them working together as a team, and it'll be surprising even to you how much they can accomplish.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.